this event today. So today we'll be discussing, I believe, a very important issue for not only for our action, but for researchers in general. So how to prepare efficient policy briefs. We're very lucky today to have with us Andrea Staginescu Olteanu, who's the head of a unit on maritime innovation, marine knowledge and investment of DG Mare. So we're very grateful to have a person on the receiving end of policy advice to give us her view, and Professor Ralph Doring, Senior Advisor, Deputy Head of the Economic Analysis Unit of the Institute of Sea Fisheries in Bremerhaven, Germany, and also a member of the Scientific and Technical Economic Committee on Fisheries. So we will be getting a different perspective on experiences on trying to provide policy advice. So we're going to start with Andrea, and then we're going to move on to Ralph Doring, and then we will have a question and answer. So the whole webinar will last for an hour, as we promised.
So, can I start?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here with you today. As Maria briefly mentioned, I'm responsible for research, innovation, and investments for the blue economy. And as you can see, even from the title, it's a continuation in what we are doing. So we're starting with research. We are developing based on, we arrive with all this research close to the market, we are investing. But for sure that beyond the projects and based on projects, we have policies and we have orientation as well for future research. The science, it's the base of the work that we have and we are doing. And in fact, the science is essential for all the phases of the actions that we are taking. And there are different, I would say, strands. First of all, you mentioned about the policy brief of the papers, but sometimes it's often the science that brings an issue to the public attention. So do not, I would say, neglect this, because sometimes if comes from your paper something that is interesting and has to be heard, I strongly encourage you to communicate the results of your work, to further send this. So the volume of work and of the research, we know that is quite impressive. But if you are finding something that it's really, you see exceptional, I invite you to communicate this. So sometimes comes as well from, as I said, from the part of the scientist. And if it comes from the part of the scientist, for sure that then brings a call for the European Union to do something, and the European Commission, it's entrusted with assessing the options to resolve the problem. And we arrive at what is called an impact assessment. So there are formal things to be developed along the chain, and when we arrive to at the point of the impact assessment, which is also base for the legislation or for future action, we are developing options where we are assessing against the environmental, the social, the economic impacts, and the European added value. So we cannot, so what the European Union is doing with the powers that are entrusted by the treaties is to take action in a field where the individual actions of the country will not have the same cumulative effort. And for all the process, the science is essential. There are various examples, and if you look and try to look at a piece of legislation recently adopted, you can see that in the package and in the official journal, you have always the impact assessment that is attached, because the idea is to look if what we want to propose it's feasible. As I said, environmental, social, economical, how from the point of view of the social, economic, how the community is living and working in certain areas is affected. Competitiveness comes more and more in the picture, so we have to assess against the competitiveness as well. And also something else, it's the administrative burden. So the idea is for sure that we don't want to make the general situation heavier, I would say, from administrative points of view, but to simplify. There are also uncertainties at stake that have to be recognized because technologies change, the environment change, and not always in the ways that we are expecting. And for this reason, the legislation usually it's revised after a certain number of years. If we are speaking about regulation, which is one of the most probably coercive because it produces actions immediately, 5 years, it's a term of revision. So we also acknowledge the fact that science has to adopt. So science is not only used in what is the formulation and the revision of the maritime policy, but also the implementation of this policy relies on science. It is what we called monitoring, reporting, and verification. And let's take an example. Fisheries, we know very well that there is a scientific advice for the fisheries, for the fishery policy, because the scientist must assume the population structure of fish stock, age, sex, size of sample that are measured, because based on this, we want to avoid that we are arriving at a critical situation and the collapse of certain population. Also, the quota for some species for fishing are established, and also we have to be certain that all the measures that are taken are avoiding harming of some sensible species as dolphin and turtles. So it's not only about fisheries, but also it's about water quality. It's about being certain that there are or any oil slick that are happening at sea. And to see a little bit what is the source, especially to avoid that it's coming from an illegal discharge. So there are a lot of estimation also linked to what is the impact of the human activities at sea. So what is important as well, that all the expertise that we need, all the science, we cannot gather this at will or in one single shot. It needs a sound foundation that we build over the years. So our needs are fed into also the research programs that you see, and our most important element is the current framework program Horizon Europe, and we are going to have, starting in 2028, the next cycle of 7 years. And here you can see a little bit and probably the general things that we are interested. I invite you, when you are researching something, to go to the database of research, is Cordis called, where you can do research and look for various topics that you are interested to research about, and to see a little bit what has been done until now, because this is probably a quite comprehensive one. There is also a dashboard that gives you quite a good information. So this includes, as I said, new testing methods, but also seeing how we are getting from all these projects the information that is needed to feed in the next policies that we want to develop. It's also, you can see that there are new things coming, and we are aware about the development of technologies, and we are aware about the benefits of artificial intelligence, as an example, to determine which are some fish species only from looking at videos. There is also, and I think we should not neglect, which is the curiosity-driven research, because we know that we can learn a lot from and maybe develop new paths based on this. And now, what I would like to bring you probably it's where we are from the policy point of view. And the beginning of June, it was adopted an Ocean Pact. An Ocean Pact, a comprehensive framework looking at the ocean and seeing how we can address in a coordinated way, and I would say even more collaborative, the priorities of the ocean, this Ocean Pact. And one is looking at research, innovation, marine knowledge. And based on this, we are going to have a research innovation strategy, and we are going to have an ocean observation initiative. So probably why it's important, it's the fact that recognize the importance of science on knowledge and also of the marine data. And when we are coming to the data, for sure that we need reliable data, but we need series of data, not only the data that can be gathered today, and to try to gather as much as possible data, because what is not gathered the moment it's available, it's a data lost. So I think that in order, if we want really to move on with artificial intelligence and use of science, we will need to have this data available. We'll need to have a good modelization of our ocean and seas. And this is the development of the European digital twin of the ocean. And we'll need as well to be able to build and to train the artificial intelligence and the machine learning algorithms for which we are really just at the beginning, I would say, in understanding. So all this for sure will require future work. And if we look in terms of more efficiencies that are to be done, probably one important thing, if you read in the Ocean Pact, is that it recognizes the importance and proposes, first of all, to secure the data from ocean observation, especially the ones that are currently at risk, and to secure them in the EU databases, and to be able to map the knowledge gaps, and to be able to create a coherent and standardized approach to planning and conducting ocean observation campaigns. Maybe if you work on this and thinking a little bit from the data perspective, we have at European Union level the big two, I would say, repository of data, but not only from, I would say, a repository from an passive way, are EMONET, European Marine Observation Data Network, which for everything which is in situ data, but also Copernicus Marine. If you think of the projects in which you were involved, and we look a little bit in the past, we encourage everybody, and I encourage you that if you have valuable data, or you think you are coming with something that it's relevant for a better knowledge of our ocean and seas, and also being able to improve the science, please do not hesitate to share. It's extremely important that we are sharing the knowledge about our ocean and seas, because based on this, we can better understand the oceans, we can better protect them, and also we can make better use of the resources. So I can say it's because it's only one ocean that includes everything. So all of this, starting with data sharing, data also observing, being able to develop the techniques and using the advanced, I would say, methodologies and technologies for processing this data, are something that are quite important on our agenda. And we know, and it was said several times, that the data will be the gold of the future. I think it's valid. So this is probably one important angle on which we work. As well, for the research innovation strategy, for which we have a target to develop probably at the beginning of 2027, we'll need the involvement and the consultation of all the ones that they want to contribute. And I would like to invite you as well, when we are going to start the process, if you think that you have something to share, to join and to do it. So if we are able to bring everybody around the table, starting with member states, but also all the researchers and all the ones that are using research, industry on the other side has an important role to play, because they have to be the one as well linking and asking, going towards the science and asking them what's it's needed as well for them to be researched, linking more, I would say, the different steps and in the whole innovation cycle. All of these can lead to a better science and subsequent to a better policy. So this is what I wanted to say, but I will be more than happy to listen to you and to hear what you have to say. Maybe you are thinking differently. So thank you very much, and back to you, Maria.
Thank you very much. So thank you for sharing those insights. So we've seen, and maybe Birgit can start sharing Ralph's PowerPoint, but just to kind of summarize, we've heard from the side of the European Commission how they think about policy advice, how they try to support science to be produced, which can be inputted in policy. So we can intervene with new information, so before policy, so suggest like a new policy, or we can intervene also at a later stage as a form of our impact assessment, highlighting changes that should be done in a policy that has been implemented. I guess also Andrea shared a few of the key key priorities of DG Mare at this point, and we have been also invited to share, to provide our input in those, and we can discuss this also later. I'll give the floor to Professor Ralph Doring now to share his experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there was already some very important points. I will also highlight, for example, that contact to the European Commission is always crucial in the sense of what are the policy highlights, or what the Commission is working on. I will mostly talk about fisheries advice because that's where I'm working, but there you will see probably some of the issues. And I may be not so positive about some of the processes of the European Commission. But maybe that is more for the discussion than when we discuss that. Next slide, please. So first I will say a few words about myself. Then I think there are often, at least what I hear often when we start a new project, or that there are expectations from the scientific side on what you can achieve with this. And there I need to as we say in German, put a bit water in the wine, because that's often different, or is the real scientific advice perspective is different from many of the expectations. Then I have to discuss, because I want to explain more on fisheries advice, I will explain a little bit how the fishery advice looks like in the European Union. And then I say a few words about policy briefs, because I think this is one instrument in policy advice, we are also now forced to, and I will show an example, forced to write these policy briefs for every project we do, so that we have experience with it. But on the other hand, in my view, just to write it is not what counts at the end. It's more the question in how we best, and that I think is also meant here with efficient, how we best use this instrument of policy briefs or other policy advice in the process. And that's why I will end with some of my experiences and give an outlook on the cost action, because we discuss what we probably can achieve here. Next slide, please. So my background is, as mentioned, I'm a member of the STCF since 2007. So for quite a while now, the main advisory body of the European Commission was also in the Bureau for 6 years. So had a lot of organizational discussions with DG Mare on the work of STCF. I'm chief economist in the Thünen Institute of Sea Fisheries since 2009, with the main role of advising the German government. So another part which has to do with policy advice. From my background, I'm an ecological economist specialized in fisheries. So for me, fisheries is not simply an economic activity. It takes place in an ecosystem, so to say, to make it short. So my main topic is the sustainable exploitation of fish stocks. And yes, next slide is, at least what I hear very often is that, and Andrea mentioned it a bit, bring to our attention what you have found out. Yes, that's true. On the other hand, there's often an expectation that we simply have to produce scientific results and then everything will change. Maybe I overstated a little bit, but that's not the case. Yes, I really would say go into contact with the policymakers, the managers, DG Mare, with your results, because it's very important that it gets into the process. But there is often not many time from the other side to read and follow and every of these research results, research projects. So many things are not quickly, so not go quickly. The policy changes to improve, in my example, sustainable exploitation of fish stocks took a lot of time. There we'll talk a little bit more about that you can have an idea. I give only one example. We have an instrument in fisheries management now called long-term management plans, long-term perspective of managing fish stocks. This type of instrument was demanded by scientists for many years before it was at the end then put into the fisheries policy. So it's a longer term process, research over a longer time period, a lot of discussions with the policymakers. So what my experience is, that it's often necessary that we have to take into account that this processes take some time. And but on the other hand, when you then have this instrument in the fisheries policy, you see that the scientific advice is also changing policies in a certain way. And fisheries is probably, next slide, please, is probably a different example than Andreas has in mind for many other sectors, because the scientific advice is really so crucial for the policy that it's basically nothing is done without any kind of scientific advice. So it's a bit different to other policy areas, probably in DG Mare. My experience is that we need to translate the results of the research, and that's our role in STCF, in something which is understandable for people without a scientific background. You have administrative specialists, you have lawyers, basically on the other side, you have no fisheries biologists on the other side. So in many cases, or in most cases. So policy briefs can be then a good instrument if you have a very specific result of a research project, and many projects are initiated by the Commission itself, as Andrea mentioned. Then you are in a different situation. But we have to try to bring all this scientific advice together to then write these technical reports, as we call it, where you basically then translate the scientific advice into something the Commission can then work with in the negotiations with the member states, for example. Next, please. This is how this works. I will not go into detail here, but you see that this is a process, and it's written in the regulation that STCF has to do certain types of analysis. So it's a very precise role we have in this process. And you see here that you have basically two advisory bodies, the ICES, International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, which gives basically the biological advice, and STCF would then answer specific requests from the Commission on specific regulations, or at least it was so far over the last 20 years, maybe change a little bit now, the economic dimension to the fisheries policy. Because STCF was the only body where you had also economists involved. It changes now a little bit. ICES has also an economic working group, so that changed a little bit, but for a long time, this was the only area where you had economists in an advisory role. You see also there's a lot of this data. We do a lot on data collection to improve the database for advice. And the Commission has a huge, with the Joint Research Center, we have a huge center where you collect and store all these data. So there is the infrastructure for this. Next slide, please. So that's what I said. The CFP is a very specific type because it's all decisions are in Brussels. And what you decide in the members in the council and in the parliament is then directly binding for member states. It's not like in many other policies where you have a framework regulation from the European level, which has then to put into national law. Here you have regulations which are simply binding. So all the discussion on the policies with little exemptions is then directly on an EU level. So it's not in the member state, internal in the member states, then the member states come to Brussels and discuss a framework regulation. It's basically the direct regulation is decided in Brussels. And fisheries are the area with the highest demand for scientific advice, as far as I know. At least it was in the at the top of the list of the European Commission when they were asked what are the main policy areas for scientific advice. So fisheries is basically on top. There are the two bodies I mentioned. However, there are a few other ways for the EU Commission to receive advice. Research project is the other part. Then there are framework contracts, for example, where consortia get a request and then have a longer term project, which is not possible for STCF. And it's clear, as I mentioned, that many of the decisions are directly based on that advice. Next slide, please. So for me, the problem with policy briefs, if we say it's a problem, is that you have policy, like what Andrea mentioned, you have some kind of policy discussion in the Commission, and it would be very helpful if you get some specific results from projects or from research activities, then the Commission can use that. But that's at least to my experience, that's not that often the case. So in most cases, you have a research project because you are interested in a certain topic. It's important to do it. It's more like a longer term issue. So you write a policy brief and nobody's interested in. So that, because it's not the right time for this topic, but that doesn't mean that you should not do it. It's basically the best case is that both fits together. There is a policy demand and you have results. That's basically the best case. And that's when we discuss these policy briefs in this cost action that I will come will discuss also later. Then it's probably interesting to stay in contact with the Commission to see what are the areas where it makes the most sense. I will show now an example, but be always aware, that's why they are short, 2 pages basically. The readers have not much time. So the main message has to be upfront at best. So next slide, please. This is I think I have put in a structure here. But that, as I said, this you can find everywhere. I don't need to go into detail here. It's basically that you bring the information, what you are talking about and what's the main results I would put up really up front and why it's important. Next slide, please. Here I only have an example how this is structured. You have these bullet points with the main messages. Basically choose a title which already give that the person who should read it an idea what this is about. And then the other parts, this is only an example. I will not say this is good or bad. This is simply how such a policy brief then looks like. But be short, main messages, and that's it. And if someone is then interested, they come back to you and say, okay, let us talk or let us exchange more about this and so on. But policy briefs are important that people get an idea where is the information and where they can get further information if necessary. Next slide, please. Oh. So my experience with policymakers, and Andrea can talk much more about it than I, probably it's not my role, but that's my experience. When you have to do with the desk officers in the EU Commission, they're always under huge pressure when it comes to time and when it comes to specific issues. So we cannot expect, as I said, that you simply that they simply look around and look for what's going on right now and so on. So they are always hard pressed with issues, and it's difficult for them to catch up with things. And that's why I said it needs to be short, precise as possible, and, which is also important, understandable for the public. For me, this is often also an issue that this is not usually, as in fisheries, not only a discussion which is relevant between the policymaker and the scientist. This is often relevant in a broader political context, and that's why it's important that you also have it write it in a way that the public, at least as far as possible, can understand it. In some cases, like with DG Mare, we have desk officers on the other side who may be fisheries biologists. So with them, you can, of course, discuss the topic differently than with someone not familiar with the methods. I'm also not a biologist, but in the meantime, after so many years, I have an idea what the biologists do there. But it's important that we also see this as some kind of document for the public. So all the SDCF reports, at least in my view, can, at least to a certain extent, be understood, are understandable for a broader audience, not only for the specialists. A very important point is that also in fisheries, uncertainty is a big point here with scientific results. Often what we are often asked is, what is your expert knowledge or expert opinion? So what we provide is our expert knowledge and opinion, and not that we say this is the right result of this model produces that result, and that's so to say the result. So we must be careful to show what are the uncertainties. There's often not a simple single solution to a problem, and we need to be transparent in this. Why we propose this, and that's what we try. We argue, say, this is our opinion. We discussed it, and this is the opinion of SDCF, the advice of SDCF. And we are transparent what we used for that opinion. And we need to weigh how far we go in a certain direction. And also we need to consider that we can be wrong to a certain extent. And you see that sometimes there was mentioned stock assessment is such an area that you have a stock advice at the beginning of the year, and then during the year the biologists say, oh, there was a mistake, and then you have a different advice at the end of the year. So it's clear that we always have to make sure that we are not too secure, so to say, that there is always, we can always to be to a certain extent wrong with what we do here. So only my last slide, maybe something for RethinkBlue. I'm not totally sure what the expectations are for the action. We discussed about this and that we want to do some of the policy for some of the issues, also policy briefs, but I think it's also important, as I said, that we network, that we get aware of what is going on, that we discuss it with the Commission, and so on, so that we stay in contact. And then maybe at a certain point we know, okay, this is something we can bring in the process at this point, and then it makes most sense that we sit together and try to do this. I would also say, at least for the fisheries group, it's my impression that we can use some of the work we do there also for SDCF, especially the social dimension, which is rather new in the advice for the Commission from SDCF. So there's still a lot of also methodological work we have to do, and database, what data we can use. And that could be also one outcome, that we bring in some of the results of the cost action in SDCF, but that's basically fisheries related, I would say. But this is my background, so that at least that I know there can be other groups or other advisory groups for DGMAR which can then use some of the other results, but for fisheries, I think we can bring in some valuable information. Okay, that was my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the last slide was a very good link with to get some questions. I'm actually part of the social data in fisheries expert working group of STCF, and I know many colleagues in the cost action are part of it. So there's a way to discuss further about that, and maybe in the near future we can have a specific discussion as cost members about what kind of policy briefs do we think we can produce, because we're trying to rethink the blue economy. Fisheries is one part. There's coastal communities, there's ports, there's climate change, and all of these are interlinked. So what do we have the expertise to bring together and share with the European Commission? So thank you for that. I found that very useful. I think we're ready to take questions. So